Alright, so I know what you're probably thinking. Why are you doing a giant slab video? Well, actually I'm not. There are an absolute ton of videos already out there on that, so we're not going to do that. But most of the time in videos where they're using slabs or really any type of tabletop, they really don't go into much detail on the legs. Oftentimes they just use hairpin legs, which basically you just screw those on. But what if you don't want hairpin legs? In today's video, we're going to be taking a slab like this and making something awesome. Right, so we're going to fast forward a little bit. I've taken the mating slab to this one, which is catalpa, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous wood. I went through all of the steps that you typically see in a slab video, filling in all the cracks and gaps with black epoxy, and then a few flood coats of epoxy resin. For my epoxy projects, personally I prefer a matte finish versus a high shine. So after my final coat of epoxy, I did a little sanding and then finished off with a buffing compound. So this is where we're at. We have a finished slab that is 6 foot long and 2 foot wide. I'm actually wanting to make a kitchen bar out of this, so it's going to be pretty tall. Now let's figure out what type of a base that we can make for this thing that is still going to look right. Pretty much whenever you start any project, you have to begin with the end in mind. So what finished product do I actually see this as? So I'm picturing this thing with a semi-typical leg assembly, and then maybe a shelf in between. And then since this is going to be pretty tall, let's go ahead and put a shelf under our top. So I'm going to start off with my legs. But since I want this high enough to put bar stools under, I'll need about 40 inches from the ground to the top of my bar. So for the leg stock, I'm going to be using some reclaimed 4x4 pine. Now all of this actually brings back a lot of memories because this is how I started out. I worked in a flooring mill for reclaimed wood, and this was one of my first jobs, pulling nails. And one of the most important part about pulling nails is to not miss one. You think that your bandsaw blades are expensive? Try running a board with a nail on it through a bandsaw that has 3 heads. And trust me, I've done it. Not only do you destroy 3 bandsaw blades, but you've also shut down production while you do a change out. So really the main reason I'm hitting these with a sander, even though I'm going to be cutting this material, is to uncover any little broken nails. I'd much rather run a sanding disc than a blade. Alright, so this is the side that I really like, where it shows all of the different nail holes. I actually want to keep that in. Adds character, shows its age, and I just kind of like it. Now I'm using a heavy grit sandpaper to knock off this dirt and grime. This is going to allow me to see what the character looks like underneath of this, like the old saw marks or the nail holes. Some of this I may want to keep, and some of it I'll make sure to cut out. Now if you're curious to see what this wood would look like with a finish on it, just spritz it down with a little water or mineral spirits. Now I really don't want the chunky 4x4 look, so I've started off by cutting these boards to length and then just cleaning them up a little bit. Now I'll leave a little extra length on each one of these legs to be squared up later, but my next step will be cutting these things down to a 3x3, leaving the 2 sides that I really like the character on. So after I get my legs ripped down, I decided to go ahead and add a 2-sided taper to the bottom. Now there's several different ways that you can do this. I'm comfortable doing this on a miter saw. Is it the correct way to do it? Probably not. But like anything else, do not ever do anything that you're not comfortable doing. So after my tapers, I'll go ahead and square off my ends and cut everything to length. So now with all of my legs cut, I'm going to sand these really well to get ready for this next step. Okay, so you guys are not going to be happy with this. I wasn't really happy with this, but it kind of makes sense. I'm actually going to paint these things. I know. It's reclaimed wood. It's gorgeous. We are all wood people. We do not paint this stuff. But what do you do whenever the customer wants it painted? Well, in this case, the customer is my wife. So the legs are going to be white. And it actually makes sense to have the legs white on this project. It's going in a kitchen with white cabinets and white trim. Sometimes our love for wood can get in the way of what actually looks the best. So with the white cabinets and trim and then a lighter colored floor, I kind of want everything to transition down in color. So I'm thinking this nice rich brown top, white legs with black cross members in to help to tie in the dark sides of this top that I'm leaving natural. And then for the bottom shelf of this, I think I'm going to use some lighter wood with some dark saw marks in it just to kind of make everything flow and tie together. We'll see how it turns out. But before I can do this disgraceful act of painting reclaimed wood, I need to do one more thing to my legs. I'm going to go ahead and cut the notches out for my cross braces. So the cross braces will stabilize the legs on each side, then the shelf that I'll install will stabilize everything lengthwise. I plan on using 1.5" by 1.5" material for this, so I'll go ahead and mark my legs, and then use the depth stop on my miter saw to cut my notches. And just like anything else, there's several different ways that you can do this. Yes, I have a dado stack that I could put onto my saw, or I could cut these using the table saw sled. But honestly, since there's only 4 of them to cut, it's just as easy to do this. I'm not going to make you watch me do this. Parental advisory. This is not acceptable content for anyone under the age of 327. But gotta do what I gotta do. Look away. Save yourself. Since I'm having to paint this stuff anyway, I'm going to leave in some of the natural distressing. And if you noticed earlier, I kind of went over it with a little bit of black. And what that was going to do is bring out characteristics like this. So the old bandsaw marks, they can stay. Still want a nice crisp white. I went ahead and just put a first coat of spray paint on, and that just kind of helps to seal the pores. Makes it so you have to have less coats of paint. Plus it really gets into a lot of the areas that thicker paint won't. Good times. Okay, so now with our painted legs dried, I'm going to rough them up a little bit, just bringing back out the natural character of the wood. So for an example where these nail holes were, we're going to hit it with some sandpaper. All right, so now that I have my legs pretty much the way that I want them, may do a little tinkering around with them. We'll see. Let's go ahead and cut our bottom shelf and our support boards for our legs. All right, so for our bottom shelf, I'm only wanting it to be about 12 inches wide. That way we still have a nice sized shelf on the bottom, but we're still able to get our bar stools in on the side. Since our tabletop is 6 foot wide and our legs are actually going to be holding this into place, we're going to need to cut off a piece of this slab to about 5 foot long. I'm going to hang on to this cutoff piece because we're going to be using it here shortly. I'll end up using a router sled or planing this down, but I want to go ahead and hit both sides with the sander just to see what the wood's going to look like and which one's going to match the best. So this slab is maple, so it's going to be pretty light in color. I don't want to take it down too far and have too much of a contrast. And I'm really wanting to try to flatten this thing out while keeping these saw marks. All right, so I'm really liking the way that this looks. I think once we add a little bit of water, it's really going to make this thing pop. It does have a bow to it. So I'll probably go ahead and throw this through the planer. I think it'll fit through the 12-inch and just knock that out. But see what it looks like with a little water. I like it. So to level this out, I'm going to be putting it on a router board. And then I'll level it to that board with the bottom side up. This is going to ensure that I get a nice level bottom while planing. Okay, so whenever you're picking out your router board for this thing, make sure that it's going to fit through your planer. So my router board is actually jammed up here and it just sent the top right off. Didn't hurt the material, anything like that. It really didn't take off really anything, but FYI, it helps. All right, so I have this board planed down to level, and as you can see, there is some gorgeous spalting here, but this really isn't the look that I'm going for, because with the finish on this, it's really going to bring out this red colors as well as the spalting in this. But it does change one thing, and that's going to be my finish. So I had planned on putting another epoxy coat on top of this. The problem with that and spalted maple is that every one of these little holes, they're going to be bubble producers. And just in this one section, there's at least 100. So I could go through here with some black epoxy, fill those up, but this is going to be on the bottom. There's going to be holes that I would miss on the sides and the rough spots, and it would just take forever to get a decent finish on this. And since this is going to be a bottom shelf, kind of around a bar type area, I'm going to use a different type of finish. It's going to get a lot of wear and tear. People are going to put their feet on it. But with this type of wood, about any type of finish that you put on it will look awesome. Okay, so for our leg supports, they need to be right around 20 inches long. I'll end up trimming these down a little bit. There's really only going to be one side of this that's going to be showing. So I was thinking that maybe if we use some of this maple, sand it down a little bit so that more of this rough side is showing, maybe it'll help to blend everything in together. We'll see. All right, so we have all of our crossboards made up and kind of dry fit into our legs. Now to finish these things, I want it to kind of contrast, the darker colors, but also blend in with the bottom shelf. So I took a scrap board and actually tried a couple of different colors. So I did just the solid black, I did just the maple with a finish on it. They both look okay. But I really like this one. It's kind of hard to tell, through the camera right now, but it's a mixture of both. I've just kind of stained it black and then lightly sanded it back off to kind of make that grain pop back up in black. I think I'm going to go with this one. It really looks good on the legs. I think it's really going to tie in this bottom board to everything else. And I know what you're thinking again. Now he's taking gorgeous spalted maple and adding black stain to it. Yeah, the things that you do. So I thought that doing something like this would be right up there with that famous Meatloaf song. I'll do anything for love, but I won't do that. I guess this isn't going to qualify for that category. But what do you think? Do you have any ideas on what would qualify for that category? Throw them down into the comments. So with our support boards ready, or well, so I thought that they were ready. If you remember earlier in the video, I said we're going to be needing 2 of these. Well, I wasn't thinking we're going to be needing 2 per side. So I'm too short. So while I'm waiting for my other 2 parts to dry, we're going to go ahead and put this first one together. So one of the first things I'm going to do is to prep this bottom board so that I'll be able to attach the shelf to this from the underneath. Now, as far as attaching the braces to the legs themselves, I think that I'm going to do that from the back, which will be facing the inside, leaving the front with a nice clean look. By installing my fasteners like this, all of my cover plugs will be on the inside. So now that I have my first one put together, I'm going to wipe off some of these black fingerprints from the sanding dust. I'm going to go ahead and assemble my second one. Then we'll put all these parts together and see how she looks. All right, so with our leg assemblies done, we have our bottom shelf pretty much ready. I'm going to do a little bit more sanding on this. And then we have our tabletop. I'm just going to square this up the way that I want it, so I know exactly where I need to install my leg assemblies. And I just realized something. Whenever I was preparing the stabilizer boards, I should have went ahead and counterboard our top board here as well, but that won't be no problem. Which of course this is all upside down, so in order for this to fit just right, we should be at exactly 5 foot. So I'm going to get these locked down, then we're going to finish up our bottom shelf. Should have known, should have known. Durability test. It's a good thing we're going for kind of the rustic look. All right, so while I have this upside down, I'm going to go ahead and just add a seal coat to the bottom of this, just to keep moisture from shifting this around. But as far as our bottom shelf / footrest goes, change my mind again. I'm going to go ahead and do epoxy resin on that. I'm just going to do a thin coat, which a thin coat of epoxy is like a super, super thick coat of pretty much everything else. By doing it this way, you shouldn't have to worry as much about the air bubbles. All right, cheers. Hope I mix enough. Personally, I like to use a little trowel to move this around, and then I'll finish off with my hands. So I already know that this is going to need a second coat, or while it's still tacky, I could just mix up a little bit more. I think that it would level everything out. Just a couple dry spots where it's really soaking it up. So with this first coat, the main thing is just getting the epoxy over everything. So it's kind of similar to an air sealing coat, except I'm not doing a deep pour on this. It may level out just fine since I'm kind of going for a matte finish. Of course, you want to hit your end grain a couple times. Soaks everything right up. All right, so now that our bottom shelf is dry, it's going to take a little time to knock off these stalactites slash stalagmite or whatever they are type drippings. Actually, I found that an oscillating tool is perfect for this. Then I'm going to start sanding this thing down to a matte finish. I know a lot of you guys really like the super shiny gloss. It's just not for me. Alright, so I'm going to see what this looks like just with this level of matte finish to it. And I can always take it down a little bit more if I need to. And to finish it off, I'm just going to put a little buffing compound and polish on this just to bring back some of that shine. Now there's the look that I'm going for. Not too glossy, not too dull. I think it turned out pretty awesome. All right, so I'm actually pretty excited about this to see how everything's going to match up. I have not put the bottom shelf on yet. This thing's looking pretty awesome, I think. Really liking this height, and I'm hoping that this shelf's going to top it all off and actually stabilize it up a little bit. It's a little bit wobbly with these long legs. Surely this will do the trick. Let's find out. So the only thing left to do is to throw some screws in from the bottom to attach this bottom shelf, and we'll be pretty much done. And there we have it. I am super happy with the way that this thing turned out. This thing is going to fit perfect in the area that we need, and it's going to be super useful. We can probably fit 3, maybe 5 bar stools around this side and completely leave this side open. And I'm pretty sure that the wife is going to love it. So this build is a perfect example that you can create something awesome and unique out of about any size of material. So once again, we have created something crazy awesome just on the fly, all thanks to keeping an open mind and having a bit of creativity. So until next time, guys, get up, get out, and get your make on. We'll see ya. Imagine taking a pile of wood and turning it into something amazing. Now, imagine doing that without years of frustration. You do not need a fancy workshop, expensive tools, or years of experience. With Woodworking Kickstart, you'll build confidence and real skills in no time. So you can spend years making mistakes and learning the hard way like I did, or you can start building with confidence today. So join me in Woodworking Kickstart and let's get your journey started.